What's up, YouTube? Yesterday we went over the softcore Atziri kill on Ambush League, and today we're gonna do the hardcore Atziri kill on Invasion League. Invasion League is the hardcore counterpart of Ambush League, and this build is quite a bit different, right? It's not Spectral Throw, but it's a build as iconic as the Dawn of Time, and it revolves around Cyclone. And you might be wondering, how is he even cycloning? If you look at this thing, it has 0 mana on it. And the reason being is you're using one of the most iconic, unique Soul Taker, no chess piece on, right? So this character is the definition of a Giga Chad. It has so much life, it has so much block, it has so much spell block, and it is nearly invincible to fire and lightning damage. And I just wanted to showcase this, right? See, look, it's just tanking everything, right? So you can see this character is a lot different than the way that Mathel did it. This person is Havoc, I think. And it's actually a funny fact. I think the hardcore Invasion League Atziri kill, the first and second place person killed it within, I think, 10 to 15 minutes of each other. I actually ended up getting the third place kill, and I actually used Mathel's build with Spectral Throw instead of doing this Cyclone spell block. But as you can see, this build is all about just being able to tank like multiple hits and pretty much just going in and out, in and out. And it does seem like the puncture you get from the spears is actually what does most of the damage. He actually is pretty much immune to spell damage because he has 97, 98% resist. And he also has 75% spell block, right? So that's how you can see that he's actually taking so much stuff and still living. If you looked at Mathel's thing from yesterday, you can see that he actually dodged mostly everything, or he would just die. But basically, we're going to go over the build, see why this helm is so amazing, and yeah, that was actually quite a long split phase, right? So before we start off, it's kind of funny to see and look back on how long PoE has been around for and what their initial rationale was behind the league. So hardcore and softcore used to have different leagues. So before, like, the softcore leagues were meant to just be like fun, some added monsters or mechanics or more loot, while hardcore league was more about killing you. As simple as that, right? So with the release of Atziri, you had Ambush League, which pretty much just gave you strong boxes filled with fun stuff and free stuff like Cardo boxes, Gem Cutter boxes, while Invasion League just had big scary invasion monsters like Judgment Apparatus, two spiders that literally just one-shotted you as soon as you saw them. And then you had Rampage, which is a softcore league, super fun, get a lot of Rampage stacks, movement speed and everything. While Beyond League, you just had Name, or the one that jumps on you, shoots out the spears. That thing killed a lot of people back in the day. And then you also had Mammoth, which would just DD you. So basically, Hardcore League was a nightmare, while Softcore League was Disneyland, or paradise, as you might call it. But it's kind of funny, a lot of the league mechanics we do like today, like Beyond, was something that softcore players never even got to experience on release because it was gated for hardcore only. Now you can see in 2.1 they decided to scrap this completely, so these were all released simultaneously. And Talisman League was actually the first league where hardcore and softcore shared the same league. It's kind of funny. I guess that's the league that Chris actually personally worked on. And it makes sense, right? Because Talisman League is the first league that was shared between both hardcore and softcore. But Talisman League, if I remember correctly, was absolutely awful. I think when I was playing Talisman League, I actually never interacted with the mechanic because it was just so unrewarding, right? And that could be said for a lot of league mechanics in today's time, like Arch Nemesis. A lot of people in Trade League do not even interact with it. But basically, what is the build that actually killed Hardcore Atziri first? So this build, like I said, is old school Cyclone with Bringer of Rain and Soul Taker. Now, Bringer of Rain used to be one of the most sought after items, right? It was one of the most prestigious items. It was like owning a Ferrari because it counted as your helm and your chest piece, and it gave you a six link. Now, six linking items back in the past was a pretty difficult task purely because you can't really get that much. There's no six link fusing. A lot of people would actually resort to doing six link lottos where you would have people six link your item and then you would pay a payout of 15x if someone hit it. And that was pretty much just done through spamming global, right? So it's like if you had a lotto channel on TFT and you found someone to throw fusings at your item. And that was just something that people used to do a lot. And yeah, It's kind of weird because people just couldn't buy the base to actually 6-link the item themselves. Now, this item is so insane because it was a 7-link actually. It gave you melee fizz, faster attacks, and blind. And this is the current day version of the item, and this is the what's it called? The legacy item. So you can see here they nerfed the block from 15 to 6%. The life they actually rebuffed back up to 200 to 220, and they actually gave you 20% chance to gain an endurance charge when on kill. And this item actually went through a lot of iterations, right? And you also use this axe called Soul Taker. Now, Soul Taker made it so your fizz attacks can chill, and it also made it so you don't need any mana cost. And like today, Aegis Aurora was still OP back in the day, and people would use Aegis Aurora and Rainbow Stride and Stone of Lazarus to get spell block, and then they would switch in Sapphiros for fights where you actually need the elemental resist, right? So Aegis Aurora, OP since the dawn of time, right? So what were the build defenses for this build that allowed him to pretty much tank every single mechanic that Atziri threw at him? And Flash used to give 10% maximum resist. I don't think a lot of people notice. Is that you had Ruby Flash, Topaz Flash, and stuff like that. So let's see here. So Flash used to it's actually just brought this up. It's frustrating how good Bringer of Rain is, right? So people actually thought that Bringer of Rain was OP. And part of that is because it did give so much resist. So nowadays, Ruby Flash, Topaz Flash, and Sapphire Flash gives like reduced damage taken, while before it used to give 10 maximum resist. So that means if you have a character, so his character at 87, 82, 86. So if you got your character to 90% resist, that means with the flash, you are immune to damage. And that's because there's no 100% cap. Nowadays, there's a 90% cap on elemental resistance, so you can't go over it. But before, the sky was the limit, right? So you could actually be immune to damage. And that's how actually the world first Uber Atziri kill was done. And we'll go over that in another video sometime. And by using Bringer of Rain, Stone of Lazarus, and Sapphiros Frame, this allowed him to get max spell block. Now, Sapphiros Frame used to be a beast in the past, right? It gave you 36% chance to block spell damage, and it gave you plus 5 max res. I think nowadays it's plus 4 max res. And this is pretty much the flash changes that you saw. So, maximum resistance reduced from 10 to 6%, and then they made the flash no longer grant added maximum resistances. Because people used to find a way around this, they would start using Pathfinder, I think, and scaling flash effectiveness and scaling the 6% to levels that were high enough to still reach 100%. And then they just decided to cap it at 90%. So Sapphiros, along with Purities, do allow you to reach these high resist amounts, right? So what about the offenses of this build? It looks pretty slow, right? Well, you're right, because the build did very, very little damage. It did 12,741 DPS, and it also had an insane mana cost because it was a pseudo 7-link, and I guess mana of the skill used to cost a lot in the past. But with Soul Taker, you don't need to worry about this mana cost. Now, Soul Taker was a pretty extremely high physical damage axe back in the days of no crafting, right? So we actually go take a look at Soul Taker, PoE Wiki. Well, yeah. So we actually see this? Does it actually show the old stuff? Well, let's go look at the PoE fandom, even though this is the wrong one. So you can see here that back in the day, when you see the version history, this item used to do a lot more damage. Well, it's still very high on the percent physical damage. It still has 10 to 20 flat fizz, and it has 20 to 25% attack speed, and it has the cold res, right? So basically, this item was unbeatable, and it was actually one of the most expensive items or uniques in the game. This item was unbeatable because crafting was just so bad. So you would pretty much try to be chaosing an item and trying to hit those rolls, which is almost near impossible. Now, on the Atziri kill, there was no offensive auras used, and he was using Grace and 2 Purities. Now, later on, when he's not running the Purities or Grace, he can run a Hatred, and that's why you see that this damage type is split down cold, fire, and physical damage, right? So the reason he has the fire damage is he has the added fire damage, and cold damage is from Hatred. And the Bringer of Rain does give a lot of the flat damage, as you can see in this here. It gives 20 to 30 flat fizz, which is an insane amount, especially in the past. Now, the links that he uses are Conk Effect, added fire damage, and damage on full life. So people were still using damage on full life before, purely because there wasn't that many gems that was a multiplier, right? And hatred, of course, was used. So what can we actually conclude about what we learned from this build? And this is the number one thing I think that you can conclude is it is frustrating how good Bringer of Rain is, right? Bringer of Rain was pretty much unbeatable for so long. It was kind of boring because it means that you didn't have a chess piece, but the item was pretty cool. I remember I used to have so many of these items in the past, and I was selling them all the time. Now, Flash of Surgeons and Maximum Resistances were pretty much just completely bonkers and really unfair in how good they were because you were pretty much just immune to damage. And Surgeons was a mod that had no internal cooldown before, so imagine like how today we have Flagellance, which gives you a flash charge when an enemy hits you. Well, before you can pretty much generate flash charges infinitely as long as you're attacking a mob, and that requires no investment besides a prefix on the flash. And Bringer of Rain has been nerfed so many times, and it's actually kind of sad how bad it is today. In fact, a lot of legacy items are pretty sad nowadays because they pretty much nerfed them to be really, really bad, and then the game had more power creep, and the items are still really, really bad. In fact, they're even worse than before. So it'd be kind of fun to see some of these leagues where they rebuff some of these old legacy uniques to some absurd values, right? And see if people could still play it in the past. And lastly, block and spell block has been something that is completely busted if you get enough of it. Being able to avoid damage completely of 75% of the value while also being able to still proc like life gain on block and Aegis Aurora, stuff like that is just crazy, right? So even in the past when people were trying to do the hardest content, they were still relying on block, spell block, and maximum resistances. And that's pretty much what the game is still today. So even though the damage is low on the build, it still uses almost all of the same core concepts that people use, which is getting more and more multipliers from your links and then scaling the flat fizz on your weapon. And for defenses, maximum resist as always, especially with Melding of Flesh nowadays, and block and spell block, because right now Melding of Flesh with Aegis Aurora is actually probably one of the most broken defensive combos that actually exists. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope everyone liked this video in terms of learning about the build. And yeah, I mean, you should be glad that you don't need a gem swap for Atziri ad phase, and you don't need to actually spend like 5 minutes doing a split phase. But thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you find more mirrors, exalts, and soul takers to me, and see you next time. Bye.